Welcome back, everybody. Well, the opening of the UN General Assembly is not the only big happening here in New York City this week. It's been a crazy week in New York City, in fact. There's also Climate Week NYC, where hundreds of government and business leaders are meeting to develop a public-private response to climate change. Among those leaders is Todd Whitman, the former EPA chief under President Bush and former governor of New Jersey. She's now the co-chair of the Clean and Safe Energy Coalition, and she's here with us today. Governor Whitman, great to have you here.
It's a pleasure.
Energy policy is something I feel like we cannot seem to fix and really get a hand of. Where are we in that process, and what progress are you guys making at all this week?
Well, they're nowhere right now. I mean, Congress has got to act. We need a national energy policy for a whole host of reasons, fiscal as well as national security, as well as a 28% increase in demand coming at us by 2030. And yet it's gotten all caught up in a climate change debate that's become political and it's partisan now. And you can't seem to talk about issues in Washington without putting them through the partisan political prism, not the policy one. So what leaders at the meetings going on now are trying to do is say, how do we get around this? How do we create the atmosphere that tells those in public office, you know what, we care. Whether or not you believe that humans are causing climate change, doesn't it just make intuitive sense to stop pouring all the stuff we're pouring into the air? And, oh, by the way, you know it's happening, whether we cause it or not. You know something is happening, so we've got to adapt to it. We've got to figure, what do we do?
You co-chair Clean and Safe Energy Coalition,
right,
which, with, by the way, the co-founder of Greenpeace, right?
Patrick Moore.
So a lot of people on the left, obviously, are behind this, and clean I get, but safe, it kind of worries me because, you know, anything can happen, as we've just seen here with BP.
Well, what we're talking about is nuclear.
Of course, but I read through what you wrote in the Huffington Post, and when you say, you know, these plants could withstand being struck by a Boeing 767 jetliner, and they've got, you know, reactor shutdown systems. To me, reactor shutdown system sounds like blowout preventer.
Well, it's a little bit more than that, and it is the safest industry. If you look at the past, well, since the 70s, since we really got out of the nuclear business after 3 Mile Island, the safety record is really, it's one of the safest industries in which to work. And that comes from outside sources.
Deepwater drilling,
anything can happen. You know what? I think that 3 Mile Island was their Deepwater Horizon. I think that's exactly what it was, that it was a wake-up call, even though everything that was put in place at that point to protect the workers, much less the community at large, worked. And nobody was exposed to high levels of radiation or anything like that. There are no cancer clusters coming out of that. But it was a wake-up call for the industry, and since then, between the Nuclear Regulatory Commission and the industry itself, they have increased the security vastly at all different levels.
Governor Whitman, I've been to a nuclear facility, and when you see that waste, there's nothing like a wake-up call as looking at nuclear waste.
Right.
We still haven't, though, dealt with the problem of what to do with it. It's going to be around forever.
That is not a scientific problem. That's a political problem in this country.
Is it really, though?
Yes, it really is.
I mean, it stays with us forever.
Well, actually, it doesn't. If you look at what they're doing in France and Japan, in any spent nuclear, first of all, the entirety of our problem, if we took all the spent nuclear rods we have today in the 104 nuclear reactors, put them in one place, laid them in the end, we'd fit up one football field to the height of the goalpost. That's what we're talking about. But 96 to 97% of what's in there is still usable energy. In France and Japan, they're reprocessing or recycling that and getting it down to 2 to 3% nuclear usable energy. So that means what you have to deal with is much smaller. The Congress has said it's still there. But the Congress has said that you need to have a national repository. It should be Yucca Mountain. And eventually people are going to say, you know, we're not going to let one state stop what we need to do as far as a national policy. Because irrespective of bringing any new nuclear on, we still have to deal with the waste issue, what we have. They're safe for another 30 years.
What about solar? What about wind? What about hydro?
We need them all. We need them all. But right now, solar and wind are not at a place where they are base power. They are what we call peak shaving. Nuclear is the only form of base power that releases no greenhouse gases or other regulated pollutants while it's producing power. It's also one of the most reliable forms of power, and on a per kilowatt basis, one of the least expensive. So it's not a silver bullet. It's not the answer. We're going to have coal. It's better than 50% of our power today. We're always going to have some coal. We're going to have oil and gas, but we ought to be smarter about how we use that. And then we need to have another form of base power that's clean, and that would be nuclear.
How much of the problem are those competitors that you've just mentioned? I mean, we use nuclear energy for 20% of our
20%.
needs, and they use obviously much more in France and in Germany. You see nuclear power plants all over the place.
Yep.
How much of it is the lobbying of the oil and coal and gas industries that keep the use of nuclear power down in this country?
Actually, that's starting to go away because many of those are owned by large utilities that understand there are going to be huge demands for them. You're looking at a 28% increase in electricity demand by 2035, according to the Department of Energy. That seems like it's forever. It's tomorrow, according to utilities, because of the capital investment that has to be made, the decisions that have to be made. And so they know that they have got to also look for ways to reduce power usage and to look at alternate forms of power. So many of them are actually investing in wind farms. They're investing in solar farms, as well as bringing new nuclear.
In terms of nuclear energy, there's the congressional problems dealing with Washington. But what about the public sentiment? You know how nobody wants it in their backyard. How do we get over that?
Well, actually, interesting enough, Gallup did a poll in March, and they found that 62% of the American people were favorable for nuclear being an increased part of our electricity mix.
I find that hard to believe.
It's the highest number they've ever seen since they started asking that question. And what CASE is about is trying to get the facts out so people can make an informed decision.
But we've got a long way to go, don't we?
Oh, yeah, we do.
Okay.
Governor, thanks so much for joining us.